More than any other comic book hero, Superman has been as defined by his portrayals off the page as he is within them. Whether it's the radio show introducing Kryptonite and Jimmy Olsen in the 40s, or the way Christopher Reeve made audiences believe a man could fly in 1978, the men playing the Man of Steel have shaped how the world views Superman. But which one did it best? Here's a look at every live-action version of Superman, ranked from worst to best. Superman Returns. 2006's Superman Returns isn't just terrible, it's the kind of terrible that makes you wonder how it happened. It's mystifying on every level, starting with the fact that it's meant to be a sequel to the director's cut of Superman 2. Not the theatrical release, but Richard Donner's original version, which had only been released on DVD a few years earlier. That's weird, especially considering it ignores the two sequels to Superman 2 that already existed. Worse though, the version of Superman that the movie presents us is remarkably unappealing. After leaving Earth for 5 years to check and see if Krypton was still blown up, Superman returns to find that Lois Lane has been spending the intervening years raising their 5-year-old child. Superman then mopes around, basically stalking his ex-girlfriend for 2 hours. The most frustrating part about the whole thing is that Brandon Routh is actually good in the role. He's got a great look, he comes off as genuine and heroic, and he's incredibly likable. He just happens to be playing a version of Superman that's none of these things. It's a bird, it's a plane, it's Superman.
Hi there, America and friendly nations everywhere. Glad we could get together.
This 1975 TV adaptation of the popular 60s Broadway musical taps into the same campy vibe that made the Batman TV show such a big hit. That actually led to some pretty cool stuff, too. The sets being drawn as flat, comic book-style backgrounds for the actors to play against, complete with panel borders drawn in, was a great idea. And there are a few really well-done gags. Plus, You've Got Possibilities, the song in which a vampy femme fatale swings a meek Clark Kent around the room while undressing him, is something else. In practice, though, it just doesn't come together, thanks in large part to David Wilson's Superman. Like almost everyone else in the cast, he feels like he's constantly winking at the audience about how goofy this entire thing is.
Yeah, I know.
He plays Clark Kent just a little too weedy and bored, and his Superman is a little too much of a blowhard to ever really want to see him win. Superboy. Before Smallville managed to carve out a solid decade on the airwaves, the story of a younger, pre-Superman Clark Kent found its way into syndicated television as Superboy in 1988. Set during Clark's college years in Florida, the first season was shot on a tight budget, but still managed to tell pretty interesting stories about its title character, played by John Hames Newton. Though the series was a hit, Newton lasted only a single season, after producers used a DUI as an excuse to replace him after he asked for a pay raise.
This imposter will be more than happy to sign a full confession to the crimes committed in my name.
Superman. Here's the weirdest thing about Kirk Alyn's tenure as Superman in the 1948 serial. While his name did appear on the posters, identifying him as the actor who played Clark Kent, Columbia Pictures never actually credited him in the serial itself. Instead, they promoted the film as starring Superman, taking some time off from fighting crime and saving the world to make his motion picture debut. Looking back, it seems like a pretty bizarre promotional choice, but in all honesty, Alyn really did sell it. His big smile and Hellraiser attitude were a great match for the early iteration of the character. There was only one truly bizarre thing about the serial version of Superman, though. Since they didn't have the budget for a live-action special effect, all the scenes of Superman flying were done by showing Alyn's very human form quickly turning into an animated cartoon that would fly around before landing behind something, so they wouldn't have to animate the landing. That's weird. Supermen Dönüyor. Is Turkey's 1979 bootleg action epic The Return of Superman good? No. No, it is not. Is it, however, absolutely worth watching, only to see how truly insane it is? Yes. Since Turkish laws at the time prevented American blockbusters like Superman from being shown, enterprising Turkish filmmakers just made their own version. This resulted in a film in which a suspiciously scrawny Superman comes to Earth from a Krypton that appears to be decorated by Christmas tree ornaments. And the shots of Superman flying are done by dangling a Ken doll and a homemade Superman costume on a string. So, no. It's not what you'd call good, but Tafen Demir's performance is certainly unique and incredibly entertaining. The Adventures of Superboy. After John Newton left the Superboy television show, the title for the second, third, and fourth seasons passed to Gerard Christopher, who benefited from joining a show that was already a success. As a result, he had a lot more to do than his predecessor, both on and off screen. Christopher actually ended up writing 2 episodes of the series himself.
I want Superboy!
He also had the benefit of being a little older and having a little more experience. Despite the fact that he was playing a sophomore in college, Christopher turned 30 the year he landed the role, and the experience he brought to the table shows. There's a sincerity to his portrayal of Superboy, and his Clark Kent was purposefully a little nerdier than Newton's to bring him closer into step with Christopher Reeve's bumbling, stuttering Clark from the films. Smallville. With 218 episodes over the course of 10 seasons beginning in 2001, Smallville's Tom Welling put more time into playing Clark Kent than any other live-action performer. But then, that's also the problem. Smallville famously had an approach rooted in the simple rule, no tights, no flights. The idea was that their focus would be on a young Clark Kent in the years before he decided to become Superman. The show was such a hit, though, that it took a whole decade to get around to becoming Superman. As a result, Smallville's Clark becomes a victim of his own success, forced by the rules of the show into an indecisiveness that even Hamlet would find a little annoying. The show went on long enough that it even outlasted the original setting of the title, and Clark ended up doing pretty much everything you'd expect to see a grown-up Superman do. The thing is, he only did it as the red-blue blur. If we ever get around to ranking red-blue blurs, he'll be at the top of the list, but as Superman, he leaves a little to be desired. Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman. Smallville erred on the side of putting too much focus on Clark Kent, and the DC blockbusters went to the other extreme and barely bothered to include Superman's alter ego at all. But beginning in 1993, Lois and Clark struck a balance that few other portrayals of the character have managed to even come close to. The trick is right there in the title. Lois and Clark comes first, emphasizing the love story. And this didn't detract from the action. Instead, it did the opposite, adding a level of drama that got fans invested in a kind of ongoing soap opera without ever letting it get in the way of superpowered action. The single best thing that Lois and Clark ever did was, after 3 different fakeouts, calling the episode where the title characters got married, "Swear to God, this time we're not kidding." That said, a close second was the way that Dean Cain's take on the Man of Steel got the dynamic of the secret identity right. Superman is what he does. Clark Kent is who he is.
That's ridiculous. You are Superman.
No. Lois, Superman is what I can do. Clark is who I am.
And a close third?
Hey, look over there. Wow.
Man of Steel and the DC Extended Universe. The DCEU may have its origins in an unrelentingly bleak place, but Henry Cavill's arc as Superman transcends even the dreariest parts. As Superman, he's pretty much the truest thing you'll ever get to his comic appearance. And for the first time on screen, he's not just a dude with superpowers, but an alien god. Sure, his initial arc consists of murdering the villain, getting his butt whooped by Batman, and then dying. Pretty dark, but also a great match for Ben Affleck's Batman. By the end of 2017's Justice League, we've got a sunnier and more optimistic version of Superman. A guy who could joke around with the Flash and hopefully open the door to a much brighter DCEU. What more could you want in a Superman? The Adventures of Superman. Even though the show was on the air for over 100 episodes beginning in 1952, the most defining moment of George Reeve's tenure as Superman on The Adventures of Superman didn't happen on the screen. It happened in real life. Reeves was acutely aware of the fact that kids looked up to him. He even quit smoking so that he wouldn't be caught by a photographer and set a bad example for his younger viewers, and pushed for scripts that would give good messages about respect and tolerance of others. The downside to that was that when he made public appearances in costume, a few children would attempt to test Superman's invulnerability with a quick punch or a kick to the shins. At one appearance, a kid took things much further by bringing his father's pistol in an effort to see if bullets would really bounce off Superman. Reeves, thinking quickly, convinced the child to hand over the loaded gun, as immortalized in the 2006 film Hollywoodland.
If you did shoot me, and the bullet bounced off, it might accidentally hit someone else. We don't want that to happen, do we?
That's the kind of thing Superman himself would have done. Supergirl. There's a moment in the second season of Supergirl where everyone is eagerly awaiting the arrival of Kara Zor-El's more famous cousin. When he does show up, Superman lands and then spends the next few minutes smiling and shaking hands with everyone, learning their names and greeting them not as an alien savior, but as someone who sees them as equals. That's the moment where it was clear that the show's producers understood Superman as well as they understand his cousin. Tyler Hoechlin's take on Superman has a warmth and honesty that goes perfectly with the world the show has created, an affable attitude and humanity that doesn't go away when he takes off his glasses. With his first appearance in 2017, he might not have the tenure of some of the other Supermen on this list, but what he does have is a note-perfect vision of a hero who's here to help. Superman. If you go looking for people's thoughts about Christopher Reeve's performance as the Man of Steel starting in 1978 Superman, the one thing you'll read over and over is that he looked like he stepped off the pages of the comics and into the real world. But the truth is that Reeve embodied the idea of Superman so well that the comics had to change to keep up. His easy smile, his reassuring confidence, it's all there on screen. He even made the eye-popping costume look great, and did such a great job with the double identity that it was easy to believe the citizens of Metropolis would overlook the meek, slouchy Clark Kent as a disguise for Superman. Looking back at them years later, the movies themselves can be wildly uneven. 3 and 4 aren't as bad as you remember, and the first 2 aren't as good. But at least Reeve's performance remains unassailably great in virtually every way. Thanks for watching. Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.